This week's show is brought to you by Paste Interactive. Paste Interactive makes apps that help people perfect their lives. They created Jump Chart for wiring content into websites, Staction for staying on task together, and Paprika for tracking your text and to-dos. Check out Paste at pasteinteractive.com. And by Gobble. Gobble has a job opening I want to let you know about. At Gobble, you can write code that feeds people, learn a lot, and deploy every day. Gobble.com connects people with neighborhood chefs, and the engineering team at Gobble is looking to hire programmers that are dedicated to good code, learning, and skill sharing with each other. They achieve continual learning through weekly retrospectives, code review, and the occasional pairing session. If Rails, RSpec, Haml, Sass, and jQuery strike your fancy, apply today. Gobble is located in Palo Alto, California, and they're open to relocating people from around the country. Welcome to the Changelog episode 0.6.7. I'm Adam Stacoviak.
And I'm Wynn. This is the Changelog. We cover what's fresh and new in open source. If you found us on iTunes, we're also on the web at thechangelog.com. We're also up on GitHub.
And if you head to github.com/explore, you'll find some trending repos, some feature repos from our blog, as well as our audio podcast. And if you're on Twitter, follow Changelog Show and me, Adam Stack.
And I'm Penguin, Pengwynn. Fun episode this week. Talked to Paul Irish over at Google about HTML5 and other stuff.
Other stuff for sure.
We're a couple of fanboys since we, I guess, talk about this stuff all the time. You perked up a bit on this episode.
It's actually, a lot of the shows, RVM, I get that, right? But you go to BDSM and I'm lost. And thank God for Steve to come on that show because that wouldn't have been my place. But shows like this I can have fun with, so.
For sure. I had a week off. We took a week down at Lone Star RubyConf down in Austin. Got to meet our buddy Steve Klabnik face-to-face. He brought the house down with his talk on shoes and how we need to support those that give to open source, like Wayne and some others that we've had on the show recently that have just poured out their blood, sweat, and tears into apps that we use every day, and just give props to folks that make our lives easier. And I think that's what we're trying to do here on the Changelog, is just shine a light on folks that are giving away software.
That's right. Shine the spotlight on the people that are moving and shaking this world.
Absolutely. Back to the web this week with Paul, but if you've got other ideas for who we should have on the show, let us know. Hope to get some NoSQL on the show soon, and I'm trying to track down the folks behind tmux and some of the other command line goodies that you and I have gotten into lately. So hopefully we'll switch gears a bit.
That little session we had today in the terminal was pretty fun, so that'd be a fun conversation.
I wowed you with the tmux, didn't I?
You did.
Fun episode this week. Should we get to it?
Let's do it.
Chatting today with Paul Irish from Google. So, Paul, for those that don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself and a little bit about your role over there?
Sure. So I'm on the Google Chrome developer relations team. And essentially what I do on my team is I engage with the wider web developer community and make sure that everyone knows kind of what's capable, what are the capabilities of browsers, like what are the features inside there, what you can get away with, and basically like what can we do to make really like engaging, compelling experiences. And then I also publish a lot of tutorials, guides, screencasts, and software to help people do that kind of stuff and do it well. So that's kind of pretty much what I do.
I got a glimpse of that at South by Southwest. I guess you had the Google event down there where you're doing some demos up on stage.
Yeah, totally. I got to talk about, give a brief overview of the HTML5 Umbrella's feature set, and then also talked a little bit about some of the newer features in the Chrome developer tools. Yeah.
You might be the best person to define this, and I'll stop hogging the mic in a second when Adam asks a question. But HTML5, what's it mean to you?
Alex, so I think like Dion Almayer said that it was HTML5 is everything after HTML4, which is nice. In general, like I'm not too pedantic when it comes to the definition of HTML5. I certainly don't think that it's what's in the spec. I'm fine with clarifying that CSS3 is not HTML5, but it's really hard to make a HTML5 demo without using CSS3 because you want it to look good. Like, you're not going to release something with WebSockets and local storage and not make it look good. So anyways, they all kind of get mixed up, and I think that's okay. HTML5 is the term that kind of like carries the flag and has the logo, and that's what all the excitement is about. And sure, it's a little bit messy, but I don't think it's very harmful that we use the term HTML5 to mean things that are not technically HTML5. I'm pretty fine with an ambiguous definition there.
I'm curious why HTML5, has that military stripe logo, but CSS3 is like Air Force.
Yeah,
it's like the Army and the Air Force. What's that about?
I don't know. I actually saw, where was it? I saw someone made a new CSS3 logo, and they took kind of like the typography of the 5 and then made a 3 out of it and put it on like a blue badge instead of an orange badge, and it actually looked really, really good. I don't know what the iconography is about. I like the HTML5 logo. Those other smaller icons, I don't really have much of a use for myself. So whatever.
When you're quoting Dion, I thought you were going with the quote that he said, HTML5 is a jewel that we need to cut into a weapon.
Oh, yeah. It's Yehuda Katz's Twitter bio. It's
right.
HTML5 is the gem that we need to cut in. Yeah, it is. The gem that we need to cut into a weapon. But I agree. I think a lot of us, a lot of developers are really engaged and really excited about the web platform. And I think it's important that we make the web platform be competitive with what people are doing on native mobile platforms. And I hate it when people think that native apps look and feel better than what we can do with web apps. I think that sucks.
That does suck.
And I think that web apps, certainly a lot of people are completely delighted by web apps, and so it's terrible when you hear things like that, because in general I think that not only have people experienced web apps that have kind of changed their view of what you can do in a browser, but the capabilities that someone might not even know are there. Like I was talking to one of my old friends, and she was like, yeah, I'm thinking of making an app, an iPhone app. And I was like, why? And she's like, well, it's going to be like a to-do list, something, but I want it to work when I'm not connected. And I was like, well, it turns out you can make a web app that works when you're not connected. And she's like, really? I was like, yeah. Like, it might seem weird that you would open up mobile Safari on your iPhone to access a web app even though you're not connected. Like, I can understand the cognitive disconnect there, but there's certainly capability that we're not kind of exploring as developers right now.
Well, the browser certainly expanded to do far more than I think the very first iteration of it was intended to do. So
Yeah.
it just makes sense that as the web progresses and as technology progresses and as the back end meets the front end and all these things start to collide as we go into this newer space of the web and how it's morphing from app to web app to you name it, that the browser just catch up and allow for a more native experience.
Yeah. And I think it's actually like interesting, GitHub is a really actually interesting example, because there's conversations around websites versus web apps, and GitHub is it's like half and half,
Mm-hmm.
They were the first to really make use of HTML5 history and push state to do the cool URL rewriting with the state change and the transition. Looks really good, works extremely well. Falls back, it's like the most progressively enhancement-y friendly thing ever. And it works, but I don't want to call GitHub an app, because it's not just like a single page app. Like, there are certainly pages, but it's not just a straight up site. Like it's almost like a hybrid, but I don't want to call it a hybrid. It just delivers a good user experience, and that's what they're focused on. So making a good user experience is more important to them than qualifying their product as an app, which I think is rad.
Yeah, not to go too deep on GitHub and glorifying those guys, because they are awesome. We do know that, but I about did 2 backflips yesterday when I realized I could push. What's the key? Win E to go into the editor.
Right.
I was like, wow, that is just insanely sexy. And there's many times I want to just edit a README and or just do a one simple commit to help somebody out, and you either don't do it because you don't want to pull the repo down and do the change and push it back up and do the whole terminal/push scenario. Then you got just in the web browser. It's just sexy. It's just awesome. But Paul, I think you're probably most known for, or at least that's what I knew you for at first, was HTML5 Boilerplate. What's the story behind that, and how did it come about?
Sure. Well, so before I was here at Google, I worked at a interactive agency in Boston. It's called Isobar, and it is we made web apps and websites for everyone, for Nike and Nikon and Reebok and things like that. And over the course of making a number of different web projects, I realized that I was always taking clever snippets of code from old projects and then bringing it into new ones. And so I just started kind of developing a little template of files of HTML and CSS, some JavaScript that made a lot of sense to just like use as a default. Kept on growing that, and we kind of made it the default way that we built sites inside the agency. And then I decided that we should probably, share that externally. For a while, it was called pro front end template, I think, which is very accurate, but I didn't feel it had a really good name. And so I was trying to find a new name. HTML5 Boilerplate, because it was like somewhat HTML5y, though it's mostly like a front end developer's thing. It's not specific to HTML5. And it's certainly not boilerplate as far as like the definition of boilerplate code goes. Like it's not the minimal amount that you need, but it works.
It's a reference library, more or less, right?
I mean, so I'm fine. Like I think it works really well, and the idea is that it's not too codependent on each other, and you're completely free to like pull things out of it. It's documented well enough so that you can feel comfortable pulling parts. But I think it works really well, just like as grabbing the whole boilerplate and deleting a few things that you might not be too keen on, and just using it from the start.
I think the important thing is to understand what you're pulling and what you're leaving.
Yeah.
As developers, I think we are more prone than any other profession to cargo cult.
Yeah, totally. Like, there's plenty of things that have just like been kind of good practice, or the thing you do, or the thing you don't do, and a lot of times we don't really understand why. So yeah, it's interesting because HTML5 Boilerplate, I created it and I released it as a way to save people time when starting a new project, and what it ended up also having effect on is more of like an educational thing. There's a lot of techniques in there that a lot of people have worked on, refined, and are smart. And we made sure to keep things documented well enough so that you understand it. You can go and find the links about it, read more, and figure out, like, understand the justification why you would want to do something like this.
So HTML5 Boilerplate, it's this thing you can kind of pull things from, but at the same time you've got some other kind of cool little niceties that fall in there as well. You're using Respond.js in there, and something that I thought was kind of cool too, because I've been using a reset for a number of years now, but Wynn and I kind of bashed brains the other day, and we're like, why do we keep resetting our CSS to this complete reset, but then we have to go back in and add bold for certain things? So you also brought in normalized CSS for that as well. How long has normalized been in the HTML5 boilerplate?
It's only been shipping with boilerplate for the last, I don't know, was it 3 weeks? I think 3 weeks ago is when we shipped 2.0 boilerplate. But it was in GitHub for the last 4 or 5 months.
So how did you find out about it?
Well, so the long story about it was that people have been doing resets for a long time, and the first time I started using resets, I was really keen on it, and the number of edge case bugs that popped up in only one browser, that dropped to 0 so quick when I started using resets, and I really knew that this was a lot better than not resetting at all. But as time went on, then you realize, it is kind of annoying that we have to put font weight bold on our B's and our strongs all over again, and our headlines. And it's like, this is kind of silly that we're like bulldozering everything, building it all back up. And so of course the better approach and what's at the foundation of Normalize is only change the things that are different and make sure that they're the same. But what that means is that you need to take inventory of the default way that every browser styles their elements by default, and then change them accordingly. And so that requires quite a bit of research. WebKit and Gecko, since they're open source, you can just go and find their default user agent style sheet. But for IE, it takes a little bit more work, and same with Opera. So Jonathan Neal, who actually does the music for the Yaquery podcast, but he's also a really talented front-end developer. He started digging into this. He did a lot of the research. If you go to iecss.com, you can see the default style sheets of the IE browsers, and also the other browsers as well. And then Nicholas Gallagher, who's a London-based developer, started digging into this as well. So it was a collaboration between the two of them at the start, and then Nicholas took it on as his own project later on. And so it's basically, it's finding out the differences between the user agent style sheets, only changing what you need to. At the end of the day, you get a styling file that is smaller than a reset, plus because you don't have to build all that styles back up, and it also feels a lot nicer. I think people were kind of getting tired of feeling so redundant in the reset approach of styling.
Well, I'm sad because I was just so close to being almost as famous as you, because I was just about to release on reset.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. That's a joke. To reset it, and then there's a separate project to unreset it. Because that's what I was doing every time. I was going crazy every time I would reset our styles for a new project. I'd be like, well, right, I'm putting bolds and all these other things that you really do want. But I was so close.
Yeah. It's Yahoo had a reset, and they had a base.css, which was basically an unreset. And it's funny because it's like it duplicates all the effort that the user agent style sheet already does. The thing that I actually like most about the project is that now when you're looking inside Chrome DevTools or Firebug, and you select an H1 or whatever, or a P tag, there's not this enormous list of cascading rules that all got overridden and things like that. It just goes back. There's maybe two styles that are inherited that you see on the right hand pane, and that's it, which makes for a much more cleaner developer experience. I like that.
And I guess probably the next thing that comes along with HTML5 Boilerplate is Modernizer. And that is such a cool project that I don't think I fully understand and or tap into. And I'm not really sure why, but I think Adobe has done something pretty cool with it recently. But how did Modernizer come about?
It's funny, Modernizer. So I work on it with Farouk, Atesh, and Alex Sexton. And Farouk launched it maybe, was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago? I'm not sure. And I remember when it came out, and I was like, I don't know. It just has a pink website, and it says it modernizes. And I was like, all right, sounds cool. Whatever. And then 2 months later, I was doing some work with some CSS3, and I was probably doing something with a box shadow, and I put a box shadow on, and then I was thinking about what happens when I'm in a browser that doesn't have native box shadow support. I probably actually want to do something a little bit differently. And I was like, how to do this? Wonder if I could use JavaScript to figure that out. And then I went back and I looked at the Modernizer site. I was like, oh, it does exactly that. And I was like, cool. And then I looked at the JavaScript behind it, and I was like, oh, this is terrible. This is no. Blah. And then so me and my friend Ben Allman, we rewrote the entire thing. and told Farouk, and he's like, "Oh, cool, okay." And then I joined the project after telling him that his code was terrible. But now, yeah, it's really good. So Modernizer basically detects all these sorts of CSS3 things and lets you kind of style the page differently if it's not there. And it also does a really robust detection of all sorts of HTML5 and other features that you want to know that are there. And it gets tricky, like user agent sniffing gets a really bad rap, and much of that is deserved. But one of the trickiest parts, one of the worst parts about user agent sniffing is because everyone does it their own way. And a lot of times when you do things your own way, you do it wrong the first time and the second time. And with feature detection, it can also be quite similar. A lot of times writing your own feature detects, you're going to do it the wrong way. Like detecting for HTML5 forms, a lot of the published techniques for that are flawed at this point. And so Modernizer is kind of the clearinghouse for feature detects. And we make sure that our detects work across everywhere that we can, and tackle all sorts of edge case bugs that pop up in, like, there's a really nasty one in IE8 that runs on Windows Server 2000 without the entertainment media service pack installed. You'll get an exception if you look for a audio elements can play type function. It'll just like blow up in your face.
We've been using Modernizer in the changelog for a while, and when we first put it on there, we were getting a lot of complaints about it trying to test for local storage. You guys have tweaked that.
We changed that. There was a Safari setting there's two ones. There's one a Firefox problem if you have your security settings really high. And we nerfed that. And there was also a Safari preference where if you change your preferences, then it always asks you if this thing can use your local storage, and you have to say yes. And that's equivalent to like okaying every single cookie that gets placed on your browser. So I don't know. But the cool thing now with Modernizer is that there is no default production ready version. It's like, jQuery has the new minified version. You grab that, you're good. There's nothing like that for Modernizer. So with Modernizer 2, which we put out a few months ago, your build will be custom. You select only the features that you want to detect. We make the file as small as it can be. And so it goes as fast as it can, and the file's really tiny. So I really like that method of kind of distribution for now.
Just curious if you've seen a rack Modernizer from Marshall Yunt, friend of the show.
Yeah. There's actually, I think there's 3 total projects that take Modernizer and kind of enable that visibility on the server side, and I think that's a really cool approach. It's
like the old browse caps, except not doing user agent sniffing, just doing feature detection.
Yeah. I really like that. I think that's really a wise way. You have a lot more control, so you don't have to rely on JavaScript to manage everything for you. That's really cool.
I think the first time that I came across your name in a memorable way, I'm sure paths crossed before that, was did you coin the term FOUT, or did you?
Yeah, I did.
Flash of unstyled text.
Yeah, totally. I got really into web fonts a few years ago, and at the time, the behavior for web fonts in Firefox was that you would get a default, you would get a like Arial or Times New Roman or something font, and then the web font would download, and then you would get the new upgraded font, and there was that little flash of going from the regular boring font to the new font. And a lot of people hated that. And a lot of people actually prefer that, because the WebKit behavior is that it's all invisible and then you get the new one. What's really cool is that there was a lot of conversations around this because people felt strongly in different ways. And so now, moving forward, there's a new kind of hybrid approach. So what was adopted in Firefox, this shipped in Firefox 4, and will actually be landing as a modification to the behavior in WebKit soon, is the text is invisible for 3 seconds, and after 3 seconds, if that web font has still not downloaded, then it goes back and it goes to the fallback font, and then eventually to the web font whenever that's ready. But so it's like invisible up to a certain threshold, and then you're like, okay, I actually want to read the text on this website. It finally gives it to you, and so you're pretty much covered. So that's kind of where things are going.
I'm convinced that the CSS3 spec is kept JavaScript developers employed more than anybody else. We have the Google Font Loader that can load fonts both from Google Font Directory or your own or Typekit.
Yeah, right.
Does some of that as well if you need a polyfill for your other browser. So speaking of polyfills, is the universe growing or shrinking? Are we needing these less, or are we finding more ways that we need these things?
Probably more. Like I just saw yesterday, what is that? It's iewebgl.com. It's a plugin that enables the use of WebGL content in IE, which is pretty cool. And apparently their performance is really great. Although thinking about it, like if you're going to have your IE user install a plugin to view your WebGL content, you might as well make that plugin Chrome frame so that they get all the other benefits beyond just WebGL. But I think, to be honest, so I maintain this list of polyfills on the Modernizer wiki, and a lot of stuff comes in there that give you functionality of HTML5 stuff and CSS3 stuff. A lot of it's really cool. Like I like using input type equals range polyfills so that I get a slider in Firefox instead of a not a slider. But the polyfills that I use the most are actually ECMAScript polyfills. So I really like function prototype bind, and I like my array extras, and I like object.keys, and things like that. I end up using those polyfills quite a bit more, probably a considerable amount more than the more robust HTML5 and CSS3 ones.
You mentioned the input type range. I've found lately I've had to adjust CSS selectors when doing forms and things. Used to, you could just get by with the input type text in a text area. Now it seems like you need to select anything that has a type and then opt out of input type button or submit or reset, because there's just a growing number of those now.
Yeah. Styling form controls is really tough. And I mean, styling form controls is the reason that, because it is so tough, that's the reason that Mozilla has not yet implemented some of the new form types, is because they want to make sure that you have the ability to make those look like you want. And so once they figure that out, then we'll be seeing a few more of those coming into Firefox.
So prior to moving to Google, were you a WebKit guy or a Firebug guy?
I both.
What's the biggest jump moving? I'm assuming at some point you were a Firebug, like most of us started out moving from Firebug as your everyday development tool to WebKit. I'm assuming you're camped out in Chrome for the most part now.
Yeah. I was an enormous Firebug advocate. I gave presentations on how to use Firebug more effectively, and I collected every single tutorial that was ever posted on Firebug online. I was all about it because to be honest, there was a lot of features that people didn't know about in Firebug, and it was incredibly powerful. Even 3 years ago when I was all into it. But I think the way that it's happened for a lot of web developers is they end up switching over to Chrome because they really like the browsing experience, and then since they're already in it, then they open up the dev tools and then they figure out if they can make that work. And
for a while, I came for the JavaScript console because I found the autocomplete a lot better than Firebug. I hated the CSS inspection and things. That's got a lot better lately.
Yeah.
The one thing that still bugs me, and I don't know if it's just me as user error or what, it takes me about 10 clicks to actually select element style. We're supposed to click in there to put styling on a particular element over in the inspector.
Yeah, it takes a good amount. So. There's a few things that we're thinking about. One of the things that we're thinking about is, it certainly has gotten a lot better. A year and a half ago, if you said that you hated manipulating styles, I would totally agree with you. But now we have autocomplete on everything, and tabbing between property and value is a piece of cake, and a lot of that has gotten quite a bit better from just a usability standpoint. One of the things that we're thinking about doing, a small little difference in behavior between what people have seen in Firebug and what we have, is that when you're clicking to either with elements, you're manipulating attribute names and values, or in the styles, you're playing with styles. And in Firebug, it's only a single click, and then you're in edit mode. And it always in the WebKit inspector, it's always been double click to enter into edit mode. And I wonder if single click is better. And so we're thinking about kind of experimenting with that and seeing if that makes for a more usable product.
That's funny you say that, because it's something that I kind of battled recently. Like Wynn said, I pretty much camp out in either Firefox and or Chrome or Safari, and pretty much in a WebKit or a Gecko browser, more or less. And I'm using either Firebug or the DevTools in Chrome. And I find that now that you just say that, now I realize why I think Chrome is a little unusual for me, is because that one small thing. It's not a huge thing, but I think sometimes I have an element selected, like I have it highlighted in blue, and then I want to jump into an attribute, and like a single click should work then. But this isn't a stage for me to give you feedback on that particular feature, but I do see that disconnect.
How much of that is Chrome's influence? How much of it do you share with WebKit and Safari and every other WebKit browser?
The large majority of the commits that are going into the WebKit inspector are coming from the Chrome team right now. But pretty much 95% of their work, the work that team is doing, is going into the WebKit level. There are a number of features that are specific to Chrome, like our heap snapshots for memory leak detection, or the ability to live edit JavaScript is unique to how we have V8 working. But pretty much everything else is happening at the WebKit level, which means that Safari gets that, and all the mobile WebKit ports as well. So one of the features that we announced at Google I/O was remote debugging. So you have the ability to basically your host browser or your client browser can run a little a web server which hosts the DevTools, and you can open up the DevTools in your desktop machine's browser, and then look at like the network info, or like do full script debugging that's happening on your either your phone or your tablet. So the BlackBerry Playbook is already shipping with that. Currently, no other devices are. But if you're on the BlackBerry Playbook, you can totally just use your machine and debug that the JavaScript on that tablet, which is really rad. And we're expecting, since it's at the WebKit level, every manufacturer that ships that can have that functionality. So the next year or so, we're going to see a lot more devices with that.
Now, switching gears a little bit to use Wynn's phrase so eloquently. Little inside joke there. I can tell that you're a little bit into CSS3, at least from what I can tell just from your social profile. Sure. And you've created a few pretty neat tools. One, CSS3 Please, and the other one, Mother Effing Text Shadow. That's a pretty cool little website there. And you kind of dive into these fun little ways to uniquely show off some very skilled design talents, from what I can see too. But
these make micro apps look huge.
Yeah, I mean this. I like this. For one, the styles. I'm going to compliment you there. But what I want to come into is the state of CSS3, and just kind of what is really fun out there that people are really just using well. What is over defining in CSS3, and what is to come from CSS3?
I think So I think you forgot Mother Effing HSL. Which is also pretty rad. I really like HSL as a way to pick colors, way better than RGB. So check that out if you want. But,
our favorite actually is HSL Picker. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Whatever. That name sucks, man. Needs some work. But anyways, some of the most exciting things are happening.
Because you said that you can't even launch you can't even use HTML5 boilerplate and or do an HTML5 demo without including CSS3. So there's got to be some fun things that are just being bolted onto the design experience we now have and now are capable of with this brand new tool that's being far more supported than in the past. It was just difficult to even get the most oddities of bugs fixed in IE and your obscure browsers, but it's a whole different world there now.
Yeah, totally. And we're finding a lot more bugs, I think. Like because the styling possibilities are getting so crazy. Like I actually a fix landed today in WebKit that I've been watching for a while, which was if you put a 2D transform, a scale on an iframe, there's some really weird clipping behavior.
You're using iframes.
And oh yeah, well, what I had is like I do all my slides, my presentations, my slide decks are in HTML5. And on each slide, sometimes I would like just iframe in a website and it'd be like talking about, Modernizer, for instance. So I would have the iframe, but I would want to shrink it down so that it fits inside the slide. So I'd do a scale like 0.7 or something. And so it looks perfect inside the slide, but there was this weird behavior. So like there are edge case situations where things don't work the way that you'd expect, and those get fixed. But there's a lot of exciting places. One of the things that comes to mind is Leah Verou's CSS Gradients Gallery, which showcases a lot of gradients that she's made and other CSS experts have been making. In gradients, there's just linear gradients and radial gradients, and yet they're able to make these incredible like plaid patterns and patterns that come from pottery, and really impressive stuff. And so I really like the people who decide that they're just going to take, a small feature, whether it's like box shadows or gradients, and like really explore the boundaries of it.
I was doing that. I'm writing a chapter for the SAS book on drop shadows, and so I was trying to see what shapes I could make. So even from one circle, I was able to create like the old Simon Says game via just different color drop shadows.
Yeah.
I was curious on mother effing text shadow here. How come I can only go in one axis?
What? You can go in 4 axes.
Yeah, one at a time.
Oh, hit the WTF checkbox.
Ah, okay. Well then, but then, okay, there you go. Okay, nice.
Clearly,
nice.
yeah. Did you make sure to hit the all the way button?
Oh, the rainbows?
Yeah,
That was
nice.
That was wild.
and you're also welcome. We have content editable on that text, so you can just click into the text.
Oh,
and
nice.
Change it to changelog. Yeah, that looks.
That's
pretty
definitely
good.
going in the show notes.
Oh yeah. One of the things. Oh, sorry. One of the things that I'm really, really excited about in CSS3 or CSS4 actually is what it's going to be is filters. Filters are coming in kind of from the SVG side of things, but it's going to be really pretty trivial in CSS. So we'll be able to like in regular styles, we'll be able to say like blur 20 pixels, and we'll get a 20 pixel radius blur on that content, which is like blur is something that we wanted in CSS for a while, or like we'll be able to like desaturate the colors of whatever HTML content that is, or like do all sorts of like the filters that you know from Photoshop. We are able to do in like just a line of CSS. I'm really excited about that stuff.
Somewhere the IE team though is laughing at us.
Oh yeah, and their filters. I mean, they were right. I mean that API was absolutely horrible, but
True.
that feature set was super cool.
There's got to be some newbie developer that's getting into this, and they're seeing some sort of polyfill for doing some of those things in older browsers, older versions of IE, and just think to themselves, what is DirectX?
Yeah, there's a lot of legacy.
That's a bad word.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So on the notion of CSS3, I think this is kind of cool that you have mother effing text shadow and you've got CSS3 please. But the first thing that comes to mind, since Wynn just mentioned his SAS book that he's writing, is the fact that we're both just SAS lovers in general. And these tools are always useful to us, but they don't give us SAS mix-ins to this stuff. Like, that's what kind of drives me crazy, that all this stuff just spits out as CSS. And it's almost as if the CSS3 world just doesn't appreciate, doesn't look at, doesn't care for what SAS is doing for CSS3.
Yeah, so I do.
Okay.
I really like the authoring experience that SAS gives. I love the feature set that Compass provides. I really like authoring in SCSS, and I think that and you might have seen that there's proposals from the WebKit team to bring a lot of the same types of things of variables and mix-ins, hierarchy into WebKit's implementation of CSS and getting that specified so that other browsers can do it. And so there was recently a face-to-face meetup of the CSS working group, and they spent a lot of time talking about if they can make that happen in the standards process. So that's moving ahead. I think part of it, as far as the CSS community getting on, adopting Sass and learning how nice it is and how much time it saves, is like, people are scared of the command line. I think that takes care of pretty much 90% of the problem. But I totally agree that those tools are extremely valuable, especially for this type of work.
So it sounds like you're a Sass and Compass user then.
Sort of. No, I mean, sort of. Enough. Yes. Not often, but I would if I needed to.
How much server-side code do you sling?
Yeah. I don't sling any at all. I know JavaScript, and I don't know anything else.
Not even Node?
Well, I mean, I could write Node. I've done like 3 hours worth of Node work. So there's that. But in general, I really like being inside of a browser. And so that's where I spend my development time.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Switching gears to one other thing, it seems like, also with propping up HTML5 boilerplate, what you're really about at the core is about standards, more or less. And you've got this very cool website I just found because we're doing this interview with you, which is W3 Fools. And then not only that, but you also have what is this one called? It's Isobar?
Yeah, the Isobar Web Standards and Best Practices document.
Yeah, I love this. I mean, is this pretty well kept up and current?
Yeah, so that was with my old agency, but they've been maintaining it, and they released a new version of it like 2 months ago or so. So that's being maintained. That was developed around the same time that the genesis of HTML5 boilerplate was kind of percolating, and it just has kind of coding guidelines and things that make it easier for a team to kind of write maintainable code, because they all kind of follow the same practices, and I think that's wise. But yeah, I think it's important, that more important to me than the semantic class names. I don't really care for semantic class names a whole lot. I care about is this maintainable for me in the future? Is this maintainable for the person that takes over? And if I'm developing this on a team, I want to make sure that the team can develop it without asking all sorts of questions, and that it makes sense. And so I think a lot of that is documentation and kind of the spreading of best practices, not only within your team, but of the entire community.
Right. Yeah, from your profile, it's linked to as front-end coding standards, which I think is maybe a little bit better name than Isobar, but that's the name of the company. But
yeah,
W3
yeah.
Schools, I hope nobody listening to this podcast actually uses W3 Schools, but from what you say here, that they're in trouble and that they have refused to swap the name because they are not in connection with W3, I think that's just super wild. But, I mean, from a standards point of view, what is it that drives you crazy about people that do things like this, or don't even follow standards, or just don't have any ideas about what standards are? Like you said, semantic classes, and that's, when people talk standards, that's 9 times out of 10 what they're talking about is a semantic class name or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's really complicated. So I think a lot of us got into believing in web standards and learned that XHTML was the right way to do things. Tables were terrible. You should write it in XHTML. All your class names should be semantic. Those sorts of things. I think that now there's a lot of people finding out that might not have been the best use of their time. And so there's an interesting thing there where kind of people are running into the reality of what front-end authoring means and what are the consumers of of what we're working on. And so, yeah, so I'm actually really, excited about people doing things the right way and doing things the best way in a way that's, time efficient for them and has a big payoff. And so I want to make sure that people are developing in the most effective way. At the same time, I don't want to see them waste time. So I don't want to see them waste time with bad documentation. And that's how the W3 Fools site came about. I should say that W3 Schools has gotten better. We kind of were their bug tracker for a good number of months. And so they fixed things up, and now at the bottom of every page on W3 Schools is if you find an error on this page, please submit this form, and it's right there on every single page, which is a huge improvement. Before it was just an email address that was really hard to find. So things are better there. At the same time, I'm still a huge proponent of people looking up documentation on Mozilla's Developer Center. I contribute to it almost daily, as do many, many other really smart people. So that's where I think people should get their reference information from.
Game for some questions from Twitter.
Sure.
These are always interesting. When will Chrome add view source to the view menu? Joe Devon wants to know.
Wow. I guess that makes sense. So
it's there if you under developer.
Yeah,
right?
I'm looking. It's under you view developer, and then you have three options, one of which is view source. I don't know. I think using a mouse is pretty slow, bro.
It's Command Alt J, right?
Command Alt U for the source.
For view source, and then J for the. I'm always going to the JavaScript console.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. They're not. Is my answer, and learn the keyboard shortcut and stop clicking. That's the answer.
Red Dirt JS wants to know if you'll come and speak.
Is that sounds like in the middle of the country somewhere, right?
Oklahoma.
Cool.
It's like
It's
smack
just north
dab
of
in the middle of the
Texas.
country.
I'm down to come speak as long as I can. Sure. Okay.
We'll convey the message that you're down.
I'm down.
Brian the Coder wants to know who's going to win the GOP nomination.
Wow. Wow. Did you guys see
Ron Paul?
You guys see what's homegirl something O'Donnelly, the girl who walked out on Piers Morgan's interview? She was like, "I don't like interviews. I'm gonna stand up now." I think she's gonna win it.
Rosie?
She's got tact with. Sure.
Is that Rosie? Rosie O'Donnell?
No. She's like
different one.
Delaware Tea Party. Something.
Oh.
She's not actually.
Yeah.
She's not actually
the one that
running
lost,
yet.
yeah.
But she's got promise.
DJ or DG Combs wants to know any chance HTML5 Canvas CSS sprites will allow native animation.
Adam, you want to take this one?
He's got a nice. We may have been rickrolled with this one. He includes a YouTube link to a Mickey Mouse video.
Yeah, I saw this before and I was a little curious. Native web animation, right? I mean, you can animate. So CSS animation, which is in WebKit and now Firefox, you can actually animate a background position of an image sprite and make it animated. And you can have a little contra character walking across the screen, and he's walking, and you can do it only with CSS. That's
nice.
pretty cool. And that's native web animation. Of course, you can animate on a canvas. You can animate anything with CSS transitions. So we've seen web animation for a while now, I guess.
What's the scoop on WebM?
WebM is...
WebM, dang near killed him.
I don't know. So we have WebM support in Chrome, and Firefox, and Opera. We don't have it in Safari or IE. IE and Safari support H264, and Chrome still does, actually, but Firefox and Opera do not. And if you're doing video that you want to distribute via HTML5 video, you need to be encoding in those two formats, and those two formats only. And that's just how it's going to be. It's I don't know, just make sure that your workflow makes it really efficient to always be encoding to two formats, because that's just how it's going to be. Unless you want to manage the Flash fallback or whatever, which is totally an option as well if you want to do that. But yeah, or you're not going to get it on iOS, I suppose. So it takes a little bit of work, to be honest. Zencoder, I know Zencoder, and there's a few other video services that kind of, you give it one file and it makes HTML5 video work everywhere for you. those services are actually really nice. Save you a lot of headaches. It's like web fonts. Web fonts are also really a pain. There's a lot of edge cases, and so using things like Google Web Fonts saves you quite a bit of headaches. So, yeah.
So speaking of HTML5 audio and video, what can we expect advancements in the shadow DOM and some of the below the surface things we can style?
Yeah, so there's a shadow DOM set up in WebKit, but right now none of it is really developer facing at the moment. There is some really exciting stuff going on. It's very much related. It's called the component model, and if you check it out on the WhatWG, the What Working Groups wiki, you can dig into the component model. And it's kind of a new way of structuring elements into reusable components. It's kind of what we've always been doing, but like it's basically baking it into the browser as a native way to build components. And I think it's really, really exciting. So right now it's being proposed kind of to the standards community. I'd love to see developers take a look into it and see if it makes sense and post their feedback if they think there's changes that should be made or whatever. But it looks really promising from here and looks like a wise way to move the web platform forward.
What about WebKit's support for styling those HTML5 validation bubbles?
Yes, there's on the so the wiki. Sorry, the WebKit bug tracker is hosted on Track, and Track has a wiki there. And there's this one page called like styling form controls on the WebKit Track wiki, and it has all the details on styling those things. So I know Nathan Smith, who made Formalize. He was working a lot on those validation things. I pointed him to that page, and he was able to figure out the last of his styling woes. So that's the page that you want to check out.
You know, sadly, I've turned them off on our pages just because Firefox doesn't allow you to style them. Although they do look nicer by default, the black ones on Firefox, than the ugly pink things that come back with WebKit. So I've just kind of turned those off for now, just because
that's fine. To be honest, I'm not too aggressive on adopting HTML5 form validation right now. I think that I would not yet really go all crazy on that just yet.
All right, so we're near the end of our show, which has just been a pleasure to have this chat with you about HTML5, CSS3, and all these fun things with browsers and the future, more or less. And I particularly liked when you mentioned CSS4, so that was I did a back.
Yeah, man, CSS level 4, man. It's already in draft. It's coming.
There you go. So I imagine you have to have some sort of hero out there that you just are either dying to work with on a project or throw up one of these microsites like you do for these fun tools that you make, like you mentioned mother effing HSL and text shadowing and even CSS3, please. So sites like this or just fun things that you do, is there anybody out there that is just a hero to you or somebody that you like to pair with that you can mention here on the show?
The person who has been like blowing my mind recently is Chris Coyer of CSS Tricks. Chris has just been like dominating for the past like 4 years, like writing on his blog about totally crazy advanced CSS and also like CSS fundamentals and like tackling the entire spectrum of like of web design and development professionals, and really just like puts a lot of effort into sharing everything that he learns. And I think it's really inspiring to me that he's so big into publishing everything that he learns. You know, that's something that I try and do, and he excels at that. So he is at the top of that list right now.
What do you think about that new skin he's got on his site?
Oh yeah, it's hot. I told him that. So when you resize the browser, there's all these kind of transitions when it like switches into the media queries, and there's all these transitions when things kind of rearrange. And the search box at the top has a 1.2 second transition as it moves from the left to the top and back again. And I was like, Chris, that's 1.2 seconds is really long. And he like vetoed it. I told him, and he's like, veto. So he's not changing that. But aside from that one terrible thing, the site's really hot.
Yeah, it is pretty hot.
It uses the new modernizer. It uses Respond. It uses a bunch of tricks from HTML5 Boilerplate. It's got a lot of good stuff going on inside of it.
Good stuff. Well, I think the other question we asked, and we probably have at least one more second to do it, is there anything besides HTML5, CSS3, and the common things that you mentioned that you're well known for? Is there anything else out there in open source that that if you had extra time or a free moment, you're just dying to play with that we haven't talked about today?
Anything out there in open source that I'm dying to play with?
SAS, Compass.
Yes, both of those. I would also point out that one of the projects that I don't talk about too much that I'm really keen on, I have a repo on GitHub. It's called Lazy Web Requests, and it's just things that would be really helpful for the developer community if they existed. Like a screenshotting service that you could just pass it like screenshotthing.com/ and then you pass it a URL and you like say what the width is, and then it gives you a screenshot back in that width, and it takes a screenshot with like a really good browser, so it like can handle everything. Or
Jeffrey Grossenbach's doing that on the Peep Code blog, except he's doing it in the command line with WebKit to PNG.
Okay, yeah. Well, that uses pretty old legacy stuff. Someone actually, so I posted this as something on Lazy Web Requests, and someone actually made it with Phantom.js and Node like 3 days ago. So that idea is already taken. But on the repo is a bunch of other stuff that would really help everyone. So it's kind of like a bunch of weekend projects.
And what's the repo called again?
It's called
Lazy Web Requests.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of good stuff in there, and a lot of the projects have already been, people have taken them on and like basically finished them. And so I kind of have to clear out the bug tracker because a lot of the things are done. But there's still plenty of cool stuff in there. So if you're looking
that's awesome
for
because
projects,
young programmers, a lot of times, when we first get into this, you're like, I've got all this energy of, I feel like I've got some skills, but what do I make, right? And as I get older, I'm like, when do I have time to do half the ideas I come up with?
Yeah. So
this is awesome.
Cool.
And it's actually all issue-based, and they can respond to it and do a fork and check it in, and it closes it out.
Yep. Totally.
I love the way that GitHub has grown. I mean, give them more kudos, why don't we? But I know for a while in our day job we used, at least the first month, we used their issue tracking in lieu of deciding to move to Pivotal Tracker, and it worked well for us. It did its job, and on commit, closing issues, and they've just done a phenomenal job with this in general. But very cool. Well, Paul, I think I speak for Wynn and probably everybody listening to this podcast. We certainly appreciate the efforts that you put into your work and your passion around it, and we appreciate the mother effing things that you do, whatever they might be out there. And just thanks for coming on the show.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys. This has been awesome.